Starbuck.
So?
Call everybody here.
From hell's heart, I stab at thee.
Now, are you going to go ahead and have those TPS reports for us?
No.
Yeah.
What do you do when you see a whale, man?
For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee.
It's occurring to me that I've never really done a particularly in-depth conversation on a film in this way. Certainly not in this format. So I feel I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I don't. But I'm sure we'll be fine. But
We'll be okay.
Me too. It's like an interesting thing to think about, and I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Like, what exactly will we be doing with these movies? Because I think like a lot of movie reviews are washed and garbage, and I don't like them. Like when they're like, "This is a 8 out of 10." What on earth does that mean? Like, how do you like?
It's no. I entirely agree with the message that you sent, saying like, yeah, okay, how does this help us to sort of shed light on the text and that kind of thing? Like, yeah, I'm for one, I'm not particularly interested in saying this bit's not very good. But, it's you're right. It's not a format, and it's also not really what we're about. We're about enthusing over stuff, and we do that very well.
Okay, so welcome to PequodPod, and specifically welcome to Melville at the Movies, our inaugural Melville at the Movies episode. My name is Tristan Bavel Marquise.
I'm Meg.
And call me Johnny.
And before we get started, we want to thank you specifically, you listener, be you in Portland or in Oslo or New York City. We also have a good New York City following. And everywhere elsewhere. Thank you very much for donating your money to this project. This is not necessarily like meant as a money-making venture, PequodPod, but it is nice to recoup some of the costs that we outlay for making this project. And like your support is so important to making this a sustainable project for us to work on. So thank you very much. This is a special bonus episode just for you. And we're excited to do it. So what are we talking about today? So this is our inaugural Melville at the Movies. And I would say we're starting with the most iconic and easily identifiable Moby Dick movie, or like Melville movie, compared to some of the other ones we have coming down the pipeline. So yeah.
Which will take some interpreting.
Yeah. Why don't we do Pokemon 2000?
No, I think the similarities are incredibly obvious, I think, to anybody with a passing acquaintance with either the text or the film.
That's true. When we do the Devil Wears Prada 2, I'm going to have to make the connections, but we'll all get there.
Yeah. But yeah, we're very excited about this project. Just a little bit of, I'm expecting these to come out about like once every like either a month and a half or 2 months. So that's kind of like what we're looking at. This first one's going to be, like I said, Moby Dick. No hyphen Moby Dick. Just Moby Dick from 1956 with Gregory Peck. And then we'll be doing In the Heart of the Sea. And then we'll be doing Pokemon 2000. And then there's we got a big list of ones we're going to be working on eventually. Not all of them have been slotted into particular dates yet, but that's okay. So what did we think? First impressions, Moby Dick, 1956.
I really enjoyed what I will call, again, in sort of my amateur stance, the cinematography. They make, as many movies of the time did, a big thing in the beginning about it being filmed in Technicolor, but then kind of something surprising happens, which is that the movie is not incredibly colorful, or rather the palette of it is very sort of gray and brown, except for this interesting scene with the St. Elmo's fire. And I think that aesthetic, that sort of philosophy, could be seen as sort of a blanket statement for the movie as a whole, which is like kind of autumnal and a little bit kind of woozy. 2 thumbs up for Gregory Peck. We'll talk about it. I think he was great. Ishmael, too old, but cute. Great fisherman sweater.
Yeah. What about you, Johnny?
Yeah, I think I entirely agree with Meg. I think something that really struck me is how impressive it is as a feat of filmmaking, and specifically in terms of the use of animatronics. I think it's really difficult rewatching this film in 2026, having watched it, several years ago, thinking about it, because we live in a post Jaws age for a start, but also we live in an age of where CGI and animatronics are just they've come such a long way, inevitably, since 1956. But nonetheless, that I was really, really impressed by the way that the pursuit scenes and the scenes involving the animatronic whales were surprisingly realistic, especially given the time that it was recorded in.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I agree with both of y'all. And I think thinking about how we talk about movies and like how we talk about movies as they relate to source material is an interesting question. I think one of the most banal statements that I feel like I hear all the time is, it's not as good as the book, or like the book's better than the movie. And trying to unpack what does that mean, right? To me, it's not that informative of a statement. I think it's almost similar to translation, right? We've talked on the show before about how there's lots of different translations of Moby Dick, and some of the perils with translation, or translating the one thing into either another medium or another language. There's always something lost in that. Or it's necessarily different than the original, right? And translating a colossal book into a 2-hour movie, I think you can't replicate the book in that medium, right? I don't think that's possible. What I think is maybe a more fair metric, or fair way to analyze this kind of translation from book to film is, do I think that the essence of the book, or do I think that the feel of the book is captured, even if they're not able to include everything, they're going to have to leave stuff out. That's just a part of the deal, right? But does it feel like Moby Dick? Does it have is there some sort of subjective experience that's shared between reading the book and watching the film? I would say that overall it doesn't feel like Moby Dick. I think there's something essential to the book that's missing. I think there's a lot of the sort of mysticism and a lot of the exuberance, and I feel like Ishmael's not present. There is an Ishmael character, but I feel the character of Ishmael as we get him in the book is absent, and there's that lack of curiosity. You maybe get it a little bit, but I think that's the biggest thing to me that seems absent. I agree with Meg, though. I think Gregory Peck's Ahab is very good.
I think I'd agree with you there, Tristan. And I think something that inevitably the adaptation struggles with is, how do you adapt a first-person narrator? This immediately makes me think of the Baz Luhrmann adaptation of The Great Gatsby and Armando Iannucci's adaptation of David Copperfield. Both of those novels have really distinctive first-person narrative voices, which are broadly impossible to translate into the kind of the much more collaborative narrative of a film. And I think the adaptation of the text of Moby Dick suffers in exactly the same way. I think the way that the interiority of Ishmael is presented, by and large, for me, works quite well. I mean, they use voiceover in abundance. I think they kind of have to,
and it's fine.
For me, it works. I can understand why it might not be quite to everyone's tastes, and inevitably, you can tell that the actor is in a studio recording those things, and that they are kind of layered in a very 1950s way over the slightly more kind of swashbuckling scenes.
Yes, of the time, yes.
That's fine. If we were going to be charitable, we might say that the Ishmael's narrative voice kind of jars a little bit with some of the more sort of swashbuckling scenes of the text of Moby Dick. I sort of doubt that was intentional, but I'm nevertheless really interested in it as a choice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think all that is fair. I think any time we're going to sit down with any of these films, um, you can, I think it's almost a choice, like to feel there's the intellectual thing where you can say that this does or does not seem to capture the spirit of the book, which is to say, I would say like the energy.
Mm.
And it's almost going to be impossible to do that unless the movie stops doing its plot like the book does and starts to become an academic lesson and in many points incorrect about whales, and then comes back and becomes a stage play, and then stops and becomes a music video, and then stops and becomes an action movie, which is possible, but that movie would have to be like a, you know, Peter Jackson level epic
Mm.
on that it's possible that we may never get. So then our question becomes, is this 2 hour movie an accurate representation of one of the threads of Moby Dick? And I feel like a lot of us are kind of moving towards the idea that this feels more like a John Huston movie about whales because
Mm.
it must center the needs of a movie are different than the needs of a book. We need a protagonist. He needs to want something, and we have to see him try to get it, fail, come up against the people who are trying to get him to stop, win, and then ultimately lose in an hour and 55 minutes. So we can't do a lot of the things that we find incredibly charming about the novel in order to do that. So then our
Yeah.
question is less, does this succeed as an adaptation of this incredibly weird ass book? And is this a good movie about trying to kill a whale?
Uh-huh.
And even that question is strange because, at least in my opinion, I felt it was very slow paced and sort of like languid. And it's about Ahab, who doesn't have a lot of energy except for in his voice. And he still feels very Gregory Peck and paternal. Or that's how I'll
Mm.
always see him. This was post Roman holiday, but pre Mockingbird.
That's
So that's
right.
an
Yeah.
interesting sort of place to sort of see where was he. So
Mm.
yeah, I'll be interested to sort of hear from you guys how you felt about just as this as sort of a proto action movie, or if that's is what it is, or if it's more about a guy trying to find validation that just happens to have action scenes in it, and is it successful on those terms?
Mm. I mean, yeah. Well, I'm thinking also about how the film was marketed. I mean, if you look at the poster for the film, there's a huge, there's a big old picture of Gregory Peck, and then the kind of the tagline for the film at the top of the poster is "The Man, the Whale, the Vengeance." So that clearly that's what they're going for. They're not going for deep sounding, sort of introspective epic, which is also about whaling. So in terms of the brief that the film seems to set out for itself, and this speaks to what you were saying, Meg, I think it actually hits that brief quite nicely. Yeah, does it succeed in translating some of those other things a little bit less? I think it fulfills its own brief very, very successfully, whether or not it sort of translates the things that the three of us love and other people who love Moby Dick. Um, Sort of had the success of that. Yeah, okay, perhaps a little bit less so.
Yeah, I guess we could think about like maybe three questions that are interesting to like frame, like both like this particular film, but also like other ones that we'll approach. One, like, does it succeed at its own goals? Like, basically, like looking at the film just as the film without thinking too much about the source material. That's like one like avenue of looking at it. Two, because like at least this one is like based on a source material. To what extent does the film capture like some kind of feel or energy of the source material? Like, is it a like kind of like thinking about like translations? Like, if you were to translate Moby Dick into Spanish, like does it that's like you're going to have a lot of changes, but does it still have the same sort of energy or feel? Kind of thinking of like that, like in that like this is called a book or this is a movie called Moby Dick. Does it capture still like does it translate like from the book to the film medium successfully? And then three, maybe to what extent, like like I think it is interesting to think about like the changes that are made between like the book and you're always going to have changes, but like there's this one's interesting too because it's not just like redaction. Like you could think of like changes that are made to like make it like doable within the runtime. But there's a lot of changes to the text that happen in this movie that aren't just redaction or aren't just cutting down the source material, but actually like change the plot in significant ways. And so I think those are interesting things to like think about what's going on and like what's the motivation behind some of these changes. Some of which to me like were surprising. For example, I was shocked at the decision to make like some random sailor the one who spots Moby Dick and get the gold doubloon. When in the book it's Ahab. Like that to me is like a very odd one because it seems to me like it'd be more cinematically interesting to stick with the original plot there. And like I don't think it doesn't take any more screen time to have that be like how that happens. I'm curious what you all think about that change.
I don't know if I had a thought about that change or even remember who took the doubloon off.
Who
I mean,
is it in
maybe
the
I
end?
think what that does is it fulfills the promise made earlier that he literally says, which is like whoever spots us gets this gold. And in the book, maybe it's interesting because it is a broken promise, but maybe in the film that we made in 1950, not that people in 1956 couldn't understand irony or something like that, but that they were just like, and then someone gets the gold, you know what I mean? Like, again, for the 2-hour job that we have, they were like, well, Ahab can't spot it himself. He's the one who nailed it to the thing. Like maybe they wanted it more streamlined in that sense.
Yes, I suppose translating that moment into film is complicated because if you set it up narratively, like whoever spots this is going to get it, then for it to be the person who says that, I can see how actually on screen that doesn't quite track as well as it does in a textual narrative.
Yeah, I think it could be really cool, but then it would be a different thing. Then it would be about, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it would be, we've certainly, yeah, go ahead.
At the same time, though, I really like what you've just said there about the unfulfilled promise and the way that Ahab's agency is made different in the translation from text to screen.
Yeah.
Part and parcel of that is also the absence of Fidala and the nature of the prophecies. Of course, the prophecies are also changed. Of course, because of the absence of Fidala, the prophecy that Ahab can't die while Fidala is there obviously gets completely disempowered. Only hemp can kill thee and all that kind of stuff.
It gets
so I think that's an
merged
choice
with
as well.
Elijah. And Elijah's
right.
prophecy changes.
I
like
liked
basically
that part a lot.
Oh, that bit really made me laugh.
Yeah, I liked that guy.
Have you signed the sale of Pequod, I say? Was there anything down about signing away your souls?
He's very, very excellent. But I also
Yes.
got the sense of they had to append right at the end of that scene that his name was Elijah.
Hey, you. What's your name? Elijah. My name is Elijah.
So they have Ishmael say,
Exactly.
Yeah.
"What is your name?"
Wait a second. Yeah.
I think
So funny.
I think that does happen in the book still.
I think,
I do think he does.
there
like,
are a lot of-
because I did check because I was checking to see like how much the prophecy changed, and I do think like that is actually true to the book.
It is. It feels slightly more contrived on screen.
Yeah.
As many things do.
Especially then because I think after that, then it's basically just a slow fade out into the next scene, unless I'm misremembering.
Not our first and not the last.
Certainly not. No.
Interesting thing about that actor who does Elijah. I've got his name here. So his name's Royal Dano. I don't know if that's how he would pronounce it, but there's a lot of like Abraham Lincoln-esque stuff in this movie. So like Gregory Peck looks very Lincoln-esque. And this was actually pointed out in like the New York Times like contemporary review of the movie is like they pointed out like it's kind of odd how like much like Abraham Lincoln Gregory Peck looks like, but Royal Dano is actually the voice of Abraham Lincoln at Walt Disney World's Hall of Presidents.
Wow.
As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. Surely God would not have created such a being as man with ability to grasp the infinite, to exist only for a day. No. Man was made for immortality.
I hope he uses his Elijah voice.
I feel like he must.
Oh, yeah.
Like his Elijah voice seems way bigger than like he doesn't look like a very large man, but he's got such a big voice.
I think that's wonderful, though. I think it's so right for that character, that he plays this very slight, kind of slightly stooped man, and then, he does have this really kind of, you're surprised that voice comes out of him.
Yeah. Okay, maybe to like go back a bit, and I think it's great that we've been jumping all over. Let's take it from the top of the movie. So we start off, we've got Ishmael like walking in the wilderness. He walks by a waterfall, and we've got like a version of the of Loomings, of like kind of his monologue in Loomings, a changed version of Loomings. But maybe let's start with like the opening line. What did y'all think of the "Call Me Ishmael" in this film?
Call me Ishmael.
We hope you've enjoyed this preview of Melville at the Movies. You can listen to the full episode and access more bonus content by going to patreon.com/PequodPod and subscribing at the Stubb, Starbuck, or Ahab level.